We got everybody that's coming. Not waiting for anybody, are we? Well, listen, welcome to my office today. Is my first day back from the National Governors Association meetings. As always, those meetings are very productive for the governors. An opportunity for us to share best practices, to learn from each other. One of the great concepts under our Constitution really is the concept of federalism, which is the shared responsibility that we have with states and with the federal government working together in collaboration to solve some of the problems and issues of the day. And when we get together as governors, it's always interesting to find what's taking place in the respective states, how they're addressing issues that are common amongst us all in unique ways, and finding unique opportunities, in fact, to solve those problems. We had a couple of pollsters, one Republican, one Democrat, that met with us earlier in the day before I rolled out my initiative. And interestingly, both of them said that the governors of America are the problem solvers. The states really are the ones that are addressing the issues. They said the Congress has not really done anything significant in the last decade, and they just constantly are bickering. We probably all have observed that, and we're all a little bit frustrated because of the lack of civility, the lack of collaboration, the dysfunctionality that happens in the Congress. And as I've rolled out my initiative, it's been in part because of that. I think that we, the people, need to accept some ownership of that, because we're asking Washington to do more than I think was ever envisioned under our Constitution by our founding fathers. We literally have become kind of a cradle-to-grave mentality. Can Congress fix each and every problem we see out there for us as Americans? And I would suggest to all of us that the better place to have those solutions found is within the respective states. We have uniqueness, our regional differences, our different cultures, and so consequently we're a lot more nimble in our respective states and able to in fact address issues in a more comprehensive way and bring resolution for the conflict that we're having a hard time doing in Washington, D.C. Now, I've got a card we're going to try to give out to all of you that kind of talks about my initiative. It states finding solutions, improving lives. States finding solutions, improving lives. That's really what government should be about. We have issues and challenges out there. We ought to see what we can do to find the solution, improve people's lives, give them a better opportunity to be successful, to be the best they can be, and do it as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can do that, because it costs the taxpayer money for government involvement. States have been doing a good job of that. I'm reminded of Federalist 45. I've got that on the back of the card here. And again, as you recall from your history books, as we had the need now to ratify this new Constitution, and many of the founding fathers have gone out and articulate and argue why this was a good thing for the states. James Madison wrote in Federalist 45 that not to worry 13 states about this new centralized federal government. There was concern that this was going to be something that would override their abilities as states. Under the Articles of Confederation, they'd had a lot of autonomy. They certainly had the ability to kind of address their own problems without any overseer. And so they were concerned about that. General Washington, President Washington, was concerned about the lack of a stronger centralized government. We can't pay the troops. We have different commerce laws. And so the belief for many is we needed to have a stronger centralized government to go along with the states. And so out of this Constitution came this concept, and again, we call it federalism. In Federalist 45, James Madison says this in trying to alleviate any concerns and fears states would have by saying that the powers that have been delegated to this new federal government are few and defined. So don't worry, the powers are given to this new centralized federal government are few and defined. And then he goes on to say the powers that are given to the states are numerous and indefinite. So you're going to have and retain most of the power states. And again, that kind of embodies our 10th Amendment, that the power is not put in the Constitution. The federal government retains the people of the states. And so his theory was, or belief was, that there will be this appropriate balance, and the federal government will not overrun the powers of the states and the rights of the people. It was interesting for me to go back in anticipation of this initiative at our Office of Management and Budget and go back and total up all the budgets of the 50 states collectively. And the total budgets that we have in the states is about $1.7 trillion. Not an insignificant amount of money, a large number. 1.7 for the 50 combined state budgets. The proposal that here happened just a few weeks back by President Obama to the Congress, his proposed budget is now $3.99 trillion, which is more than double what comes out of Washington. We're spending more than double the combined budgets of the 50 states, plus an additional $500 billion. Somewhere along the way, we kind of got this thing a little bit upside down, it appears to me. And we need to start having the American public say, I've got issues, I've got concerns, I've got problems. Call your governor, call your legislature, talk to your local government people inside your states. We ought to less often call our president or our congressman. They're having a hard time delivering, and it's very expensive to do so, which has led to the $18 trillion debt that we have today. So what we're going to do with this initiative is really kind of change, hopefully, the discourse and maybe heighten awareness of the successes of the states. We'll go through all 50 states, our 5 territories. We'll let the governors there say, look at some of the unique solutions we've come up with our respective states. Look at what we've been able to do here and creatively in this issue and on this issue. Whether it be education, whether it be transportation, whether it be health and human services, whether it be how we develop our economy. And we'll let every state focus on some of their great successes that are unique to themselves. At the end of the year, we're going to compile that into a publication and highlight the fact that states really are the ones that are the problem solvers in America today, and encourage the American public to look to the states. Look to the states for the solutions to your problems. So that's the initiative. It's pretty simple. I think it's profound in its simplicity, and certainly something that we ought to talk more about. And that is the states taking care and having more responsibility. I think governors, both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, as well as our independent, are saying the federal overreach is too much. It's grown too big. It's too large, and it's too unwieldy. And we need to see if the states need to step up and take on more responsibility, and the federal government stay in more of a partnership role, whereas the states right now seem to be in a subservient role to the federal government, which is not what was envisioned in our Constitution. So that's the essence of my initiative. And again, I'm honored to be the National Governors Association chairman. I've jokingly said that people ask me, how did you get elected to this position by your peers? And as I thought about it, I can tell you, I think it's because I'm the only governor not running for president. And so I'm kind of available for the assignment, for the job. Utah is a great example of success in many ways. We're certainly not perfect, but we're doing some really wonderful things. It's an opportunity for Utah to kind of help lead the parade out there and lead by example. But every state has got something to share. Every state's got something to highlight, and we're going to make sure that the states are highlighted over the next 12 months. With that, if you got any questions you want to ask, I'm more than happy to try to address them.
Would you go over, please, some of the specific duties that you'll have as a chairman? Are you the go-between between the governors and the president? Are you the mouthpiece? Are you the decision maker? In what capacity are the duties for the chairman?
Well, some of it's all of the above. We have an executive committee that's comprised of 9 governors, and I've been on that for the last number of years. And we end up meeting with the president and the vice president and senior staff on somewhat a regular basis throughout the year. sometimes as needed, as issues come up. When we had shut down the federal government, we had meetings with them, and we had concerns about the impact on our Air Guard and our Army Guard. We've had meetings with senior staff and talking about that. We've had opportunities to talk about trade authority, transportation reauthorization, those kinds of things which are important to the states and certainly have a relationship with policy on a federal government level. We will be meeting I think in December or January with the president and vice president and senior staff. We usually spend about 2 or 3 hours in those meetings. We also take advantage of the opportunity to meet with cabinet members on different issues of importance to the states. And some are unique to the West, like interior and energy and fish and wildlife, and those kinds of areas of uniqueness. Our national parks, which most of them are here in the West. So there's some that are regional in its nature. I do appoint people with different positions over different committees that the National Association of Governors has to kind of vet issues and bring in testimony and hear the pros and cons of different issues before we develop policy. And so I am impacted by who I appoint. Republicans and Democrats share those responsibilities, so we have the ability to make sure that they're kind of half and half on all of our committees. And so those are the areas that I will be involved with, and I end up being the spokesperson for the National Governors Association, along with the vice chairman on different events and different opportunities. So it's I go to the meetings anyway. We'll have some additional responsibility, not a workload that we cannot absorb within what we're already doing. Meetings that we attend to, anyway, the difference is I'm just going to be in charge of the meetings as opposed to be person sitting at the desk.
Governor, while you were back in West Virginia for the meeting, did you have an opportunity to talk to Secretary Burwell about Medicaid expansion?
Just briefly, Secretary Burwell, we have an ongoing discussion with her and her department. As you know, we tried to find an innovative way to address as an alternative to Medicaid expansion, something that I think is actually better. And we've made those proposals to her over the last 12 months. We have some modifications and some new wrinkles, some new ideas that have come from our legislature and our collaborative work with the group of 6 of us that are working together. And so that's been an ongoing discussion, and I'm hopeful that those modifications will find resonance not only with our legislature and approval, but also with the Department of Health. And I'm optimistic that they will. It's yet to be done, but we're getting closer all the time. And I hope in the next 3 or 4 weeks we'll have this thing resolved and the ability to have a special session to have it finally passed by the legislature.
What was her reaction to what you were able to present her? I'm a little unclear, I think we all are, on what this new proposal entails beyond taxing some of the users like hospitals and the medical community that benefit from this.
Well, I don't want to roll out the proposal until we have an agreement with the Senate and the House. And so I think we're getting closer, some of the basics of it all. But the concern that everybody has is to make sure that whatever we do is sustainable, that we're not buying something that we can afford today but we cannot afford tomorrow. So that sustainability and how we're going to pay for it is a big issue. We also want to know that people who are on the programs will receive the benefit. And we don't want to respect the taxpayers who are paying a lot of money under the Affordable Care Act, new money, new taxes. This is not borrowed money from China. This is new tax that we're sending to Washington, D.C. every year. We want to make sure it's being used appropriately and what is that most appropriate way to do it. So those are the issues we're wrestling with, and I feel cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to have resolution amongst the group of 6. If we can have that, then we go to our respective bodies in the Senate and House and hopefully get approval there and then take it to the Department of Health for their final approval. There's nothing I know about today that we're talking about that the Secretary Jewell, Secretary Burwell, the wrong secretary, Secretary Sylvia Burwell, will be surprised with, or that I don't think that they'll be able to support.
Did she give you an initial reaction though when you let her know the status of your negotiations?
She's optimistic and she's happy that we're making progress and encourages us to continue to work. She will be coming here to Utah in a couple of weeks, I think. I don't know exactly what her schedule is. She's going to be speaking at I think, at the University of Utah. Dr. Vivian Lee and her went to college together, and so they're kind of old friends. That's what she's told me. And whether there's an opportunity for her to speak with us, the group of 6, while she's here, and other stakeholders, is yet to be determined. I don't know the answer to that question. But she is very cordial and hopeful and encouraging that we're on a pathway to success of what we're doing here in Utah.
Okay, time for just one more question.
Governor, could you also react to the Boy Scouts of America? They're expected to make a decision today, finalizing the ability of troops to have gay leaders, with some caveat for religious organizations.
Well, that's the decision the Boy Scouts of America will need to make, and they'll do it based on what they think is in the best interest of the Boy Scouts. And far be it for me to tell them how to run their organization. Clearly, there's been a significant role for religious organizations to pay as sponsors of troops throughout this country and throughout the world, for that matter. So I expect consideration ought to be given there for their unique position when it comes to the gay community. I expect they'll be methodical and use some wisdom and thought in whatever decision they render.
Okay.
Any other burning question before we catch you off?
How about the partisanship role for the NGA? How do you see partisanship playing out in the NGA, especially with its deliberation of the Obama administration?
You know, partisanship is a part of politics. We probably ought not to be surprised that people campaign in a partisan way when they run for office. That actually helps the public. If you subscribe to a certain platform and have a certain philosophy of how you see the world in the political arena, it helps the public understand, not only the issues at hand today, but how will you address other unforeseen issues in the future. It gives you some predictability as far as how an individual, he or she, will address issues. So the partisanship of politics is not necessarily a bad thing. That's how we campaign. Where partisanship kind of gets in the way is when it comes to the government. And say, if we get so partisan that it's my way or the highway, we don't have any kind of compromise, and consequently we have gridlock. And that's the issue that I see a little too much of hyper-partisanship that continues past the election and into the government. Governors are a little different in that one, we're the executive branch, and each governor has the responsibility to lead his respective or her respective state. That means solving problems, as I mentioned earlier by one of the pollsters that talked to us here Saturday morning. Governors are seen as leaders, as problem solvers, and every state addresses issues differently. But the end goal is to solve the problem, respective to your unique state's culture and background and politics. We are able to take more of a 30,000-foot view of things. We find that things aren't at that level always as black and white as others would like to make it out when it comes to the legislative side of things. And happy to execute and solve problems, we tend to be a lot more collegial and not quite so partisan amongst ourselves. And so as we are addressing different issues with the governors, for example, we just passed a resolution on immigration, and we had Democrats and Republicans actually coming together on a very good outline as far as what could be done legislatively to come up with a very significant positive step forward in resolving some of the conflicts on immigration. If we can do it as governors, and we have extreme conservative folks and extreme liberal folks, people in the middle, and the governors, yet we're able to come together. There's no reason to not hope that the Congress can come together and with some leadership out of the White House resolve that issue, that immigration issue. Same thing can be true with transportation. Same thing can be true with education. Same thing can be true with healthcare and other human service needs. And so I think governors really have a collegial ability to work together in spite of the partisan aspects of our campaign. And that's a good example for the country. Again, that's why we're solving problems right now in the states. That's why we say, boy, if you've got problems out there, people, look to the states. They're the ones that really understand it and are getting things done. With that, a great opportunity for Utah to lead. And I'll be kind of the figurehead of that, but it really is representative of the people of Utah. And we're doing so well in the state thanks to great people that call Utah home, good principles, good values, good work ethic, just great and wonderful residents of this state that are making us exceed. I call it Utah exceptionalism. We have a lot of it. And we want to share those opportunities that we have here in Utah with other states around the country and see if they cannot mimic and copy and use us as a good positive example for their own respective states. So I'm excited about the next 12 months. With that, thank you very much for being here today. Good to be back home.